My name is Evelyn Grant. I'm 67 years old. A retired accountant. And for most of my life I believed that trust was stronger than paper. This morning, the light coming through my kitchen window felt different, cold. Sharp. The kind of light that turns breath into little clouds. The house was so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock above the stove. On the counter sat the silver tea tray I've used every morning since my husband gave it to me on our 20th anniversary. Next to the teapot, folded neatly as if it were something ordinary, was a small piece of paper. The handwriting was careful. Deliberate, my son Nathan's. 12 words that felt like a door closing inside me. Sorry, Mom. No room. The in-laws are moving in. I read it twice before the meaning truly landed. Before my heart caught up to what my eyes already knew. The kettle began to hiss. But I didn't move. I just stood there, listening to the sound rise and fade. The air around me felt hollow, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. My hands trembled a little, but I folded the note slowly, neatly, like a receipt for something I had paid too much for. Then I slipped it into the pocket of my robe. That was the moment I knew something had ended, not loudly, not with anger, but quietly, the way a candle gives up its flame. For years, that house had felt alive with sound and sunlight. The mornings used to hum softly with the smell of coffee and the tiny patter of my grandson's feet on the hardwood floors. The walls carried echoes of laughter, the kind that rolled naturally through a home where love was simple and unspoken. I used to stand by the kitchen window, watching Nathan play in the yard with the kids, and feel something warm settle in my chest, like every good thing I had ever done had somehow led me there. 2 years earlier, when Nathan first suggested that I move in after my husband passed, I thought it was love, reaching out to fill the empty space grief had left behind. He said the house was big enough for everyone, that it would be nice not to live alone anymore. I sold my little condo and handed him $200,000, enough, he said, to help finish the new floor, the nursery, and the kitchen upgrade. I never asked for papers. I told myself love was stronger than signatures. For a while, it truly felt that way. I cooked dinner twice a week, picked the children up from school, and read bedtime stories until my voice turned hoarse. The house smelled of cinnamon, crayons, and detergent, ordinary scents that felt like belonging. My favorite mug sat beside theirs in the cabinet. My slippers waited neatly by the door. I thought I had found peace again. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the rhythm changed. The mug disappeared one morning, replaced with a set of polished white cups that all looked the same. My photo albums were boxed and moved to the garage, just to make space. The kitchen I once knew began to feel foreign. New towels, new handles, new rules. I told myself these were small things, just adjustments. But somewhere deep down, I started to feel like a guest in my own life. Sometimes I'd walk through the living room after everyone had gone to bed, noticing how the space no longer carried my touch. The cushions were straight, the shelves perfectly staged, the air faintly perfumed but cold. I would pause by the family photos, the ones where I still stood at the center, and wonder when I had shifted to the edges. That quiet question followed me for weeks, and though I tried to ignore it, I knew the answer was already written in the silence. I remember staring at that note for a long time, the paper trembling just slightly between my fingers. Sorry, Mom. No room. The in-laws are moving in. The words were small, polit even, as if consideration could soften betrayal. My eyes traced the careful handwriting again and again, but my mind refused to accept what it already understood. I felt the air shift around me, cold, still, like the moment before a storm breaks. I folded the paper once, then again, each crease sharp and deliberate. It felt like closing something sacred, a trust now too fragile to hold. My hands were cold, Not from the morning air, but from the silence that followed. The kettle hissed behind me. It forgotten on the stove. Its whistle rising before fading into quiet. I didn't rush to stop it. I let the sound die on its own. Moving felt automatic. I went to the small room they called the guest room my room. Once. The curtains I'd sewn last winter caught the sunlight, scattering small flecks of green across the floor. I opened the closet and reached for my old suitcase. It was lighter than I remembered. I began to pack without thought, 2 sweaters. My medication. 3 framed photos. And the wool blanket my husband once brought back from Vermont. Each item carried a story. And each story felt like a door closing behind me. As I moved through the house, I touched the details that still held my fingerprints, the apron by the fridge, the pencil marks on the pantry door, the small chip on the dining table where my grandson had once dropped his toy. The memories clung to the walls, gentle but fading, like echoes that had lost their source. I paused often, not because I needed rest, but because I needed to remember. When the suitcase was zipped, I slipped on my freshly cleaned coat. The plastic from the dry cleaner still crinkled faintly, sharp and sterile. I buttoned it slowly, taking care with each movement. Then I stood at the doorway, looking back one last time. The living room was spotless, perfectly arranged, as if no one had ever lived there. The door closed softly behind me, not slammed, not forced, just a quiet click. The sound was final. I whispered to myself that I wasn't walking away from a home, but from the illusion that I ever truly had one. The apartment smelled faintly of dust and lemon cleaner, that unmistakable scent of a place waiting to be lived in again. I had kept it all these years quietly, discreetly calling it my just-in-case home. I never imagined I'd need it. But as I turned the key and stepped inside, the air felt lighter, freer. It was smaller than my son's house. The furniture mismatched and plain, but every inch of it belonged to me. No one could take that away. I set my suitcase by the door and stood still for a moment, listening. The silence here was different. It wasn't heavy with tension or expectation. It was clean, peaceful. I ran my hand along the kitchen counter, tracing a line through a thin layer of dust, then opened the cupboard to find the old teapot I'd left behind years ago. When the water began to boil, the soft whistle filled the room like a small heartbeat, steady and alive. As the steam rose, I noticed how my hands had stopped shaking. I poured the tea into a chipped mug, the same one I used during long nights balancing ledgers and tax forms. The scent of chamomile wrapped around me like something familiar, grounding. I sat by the window, where the afternoon light fell in thin golden lines across the table. And for the first time that day, I took a full, calm breath. My laptop sat waiting on the desk, an old silver model, its edges worn smooth from years of work. I pressed the power button, and the screen flickered to life with a faint hum. The glow felt steady, almost comforting. Order. Logic. Things I understood. Numbers had always told me the truth when people couldn't. As I sat there, sipping my tea and watching the cursor blink, something inside me began to shift. The sorrow didn't disappear, it settled, becoming quiet, deliberate. I wasn't lost. I was thinking again, and for the first time in a long time, that felt like strength. The glow from my laptop cast a soft blue light across the small desk. Papers were spread out before me, bank statements, old tax forms, property documents I'd kept out of habit rather than need. Numbers had always comforted me. They told stories that people tried to hide. As I flipped through the pages, the quiet of the apartment grew dense, filled with the soft rustle of paper and the steady hum of the computer fan. Each line item carried a piece of truth I hadn't wanted to see. Mortgage payments, property taxes, home insurance, all withdrawals from my personal account. Month after month, Year after year, my money had kept their lives afloat while they told me I was a guest in the home I paid for. My pulse stayed steady. This wasn't anger. It was clarity slowly sharpening its edge. I opened a folder labeled Property Records, an old habit from my accounting days. My fingers moved on instinct. Efficient and sure. Then I clicked into the county's property database, typing the address of my son's house with careful precision. It took a few seconds for the page to load. I could feel my heartbeat in those seconds. Not racing. Just waiting. When the result appeared, I leaned forward. The letters formed one by one. Deliberate and irreversible. Owner of record Evelyn Grant. No co-seniors. No joint ownership. My name. Only mine. The room seemed to still completely. Even the faint traffic outside felt distant. Muted. For a long time, I didn't move. I just sat there, letting the truth settle inside me. Not like fire, but like sunlight finding its way through a closed curtain. Warm. Steady. I realized then that what they had taken wasn't the house, it was my trust. My silence. My willingness to believe love was something you never had to question. I closed the laptop slowly, feeling the quiet hum fade beneath my fingertips. Love, I thought, had always been the currency I overpaid with. But knowledge was something they couldn't touch. It was mine now. Clean and certain. As I sat there, the last of the light slipped across the floor, stretching toward me like a new beginning. I wasn't sure what I'd do next. Only that this time, I wouldn't move from emotion, I would move from truth. I found the recorder by accident, tucked inside a faded plastic bin marked office supplies. The box smelled faintly of paper and time-old ledgers, dried ink, tangled cords, pens that no longer worked. The recorder was small, silver, its buttons worn smooth from years of use. I used to keep it on my desk when clients still paid me in cash. When trust was something I verified with numbers, not feelings. I turned it over in my hand and felt the tape beneath the battery cover. Still in place, after all these years. I hesitated for a long moment before sliding the switch to play. The device clicked. Then came a low hiss of static. That old familiar sound of patience. At first, there was nothing. Just the faint hum of silence, until a voice broke through. Soft but sharp. Claire's. I froze. Her tone was calm. Almost casual. She spoke about me in the third person. About timing. About documents. Then I heard it clearly. Once she's gone, we'll file the caretaker transfer. Nathan can sign for her if needed. She won't even know. The air in the apartment seemed to collapse. My breath caught. Not from shock, but from recognition, the quiet confirmation of what I'd already begun to sense. I let the recording play again. Slower this time. Each word sinking deeper. There was no confusion. No misunderstanding. This wasn't carelessness. It was design. I turned off the stove. I hadn't realized the kettle was heating. Steam drifted into the air like ghosts escaping the room. My hands moved without thought, steady. Practiced. I plugged the recorder into my laptop and copied the file. Then again onto a small USB drive I labeled Recorder Evidence. My handwriting was neat. Deliberate. When I sealed it in an envelope addressed to my old colleague Zephyr Lang, now an attorney. The paper felt heavier than it should have. I sat for a while after that. The apartment quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator. There was no rage. No tears. Only stillness. They hadn't just betrayed me, they had written me out of my own life with intention. But they were wrong about one thing. I did know. And now, I had proof. I met my old friend at her law office on a clear morning that smelled faintly of coffee and polished wood. Certificates shimmered behind glass. Sunlight sliding across the frames as she read through the stack I'd brought statements. The recorder transcript. The county printout. Her conclusions came without flourish. Only weight. The house was mine alone. No claims. No gray areas. I didn't feel triumph. Only a steady settling inside my ribcage. Like a table finally leveled after years of wobble. What followed felt like muscle memory. I signed forms with a calm hand. Initials landing in their small boxes. Full signatures looping where they needed to. We arranged a quiet sale to a private developer, clean paperwork. Clear terms. A move designed to leave as little noise as possible. Each document I signed felt less like retaliation and more like maintenance. As if I were tightening the bolts of a life I should have secured long ago. There was a coolness to it. Not cold. Just precise. On the day we finalized the agreement, I wore my navy suit and the simple gold ring my husband slipped onto my finger at 20. The band has softened with time. Edges worn smooth by dishes. Winters. And small mercies. As the final page was stamped, the metal caught a slender line of light, and for a moment I could almost feel his palm closing over mine. The old promise warm as breath. Grief didn't surge. Instead, something gentler moved through me, permission to protect what he meant for me to keep. That afternoon my phone buzzed with a new email. It wasn't meant for me, the subject line made that clear. Inside were tidy instructions about a realtor visit, and a reminder to make sure Mom can't access the house before Tuesday, lock her out. The words sat on the screen without drama. As simple and brutal as a switch being flipped. I set the phone down on the table and felt my breathing slow. I wasn't surprised. I wasn't even hurt. I was finished. The decision arrived as quietly as a tide turning. I straightened the papers in front of me, slid the ring back into place, and let one word form. Firm and final. In the space they had tried to empty. Enough. The afternoon was bright and sharp. The kind of sunlight that makes everything look cleaner than it really is. I arrived at the house just as the garden party reached its peak music, drifting across trimmed hedges. Laughter mingling with the clinking of glasses. White tents rippled softly in the breeze. Claire stood at the center, radiant in confidence, greeting neighbors as if she'd built this world herself. For a moment, I stood at the edge of it all, watching the life that had once been mine unfold without me. When the car doors opened, time seemed to shift. My lawyer stepped out first, followed by a uniformed officer and a man holding a folder embossed with the developer's seal. The laughter faltered. Even the wind seemed to hush. I walked forward slowly, heels pressing into the soft grass. The sound deliberate and final. My lawyer read the documents aloud, legal words, crisp and clear, slicing through the air like glass breaking. The phrases, sold property, sole ownership, and vacate within 10 days hung between us. Heavy and unanswerable. Faces around me blurred into silence. Claire's smile collapsed, her expression folding into disbelief. Nathan stood behind her, pale, motionless, eyes darting across the papers as though he could rearrange the truth with will alone. No one spoke. Even the guests began to retreat, murmuring half-hearted excuses, slipping away as the weight of it settled. I didn't need to say anything. My silence did the speaking. Inside, I walked past the polished hallway, past the framed photo of us at the lake, the one Claire had chosen to hang. I reached out and straightened it by instinct, then let it tilt slightly. Imperfect but honest. When I stepped outside again, the officers were finishing their signatures, and the house stood still behind me. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's quiet, steady, and irreversible. I closed the car door and didn't look back. In the weeks that followed, the story traveled quietly through town, first as whispers at the bakery, then as murmurs at the post office, and finally, as knowing glances exchanged during Sunday service. My name was never printed, but everyone knew. Nathan and Claire withdrew from the world they'd once ruled so confidently. The The committees removed her name. The volunteer board replaced his. The phone that used to ring constantly fell silent. Their world didn't collapse in anger, it simply faded. One quiet omission at a time. Back in my small apartment, peace became a daily rhythm. I spent my mornings tending the tiny garden behind the building, coaxing basil and lavender to grow from shallow soil. In the afternoons, I made tea and let the sunlight move across the floorboards. Slow and certain. The air there felt honest, no pretense. No waiting. Just stillness that belonged entirely to me. One evening, my phone buzzed. A message from Nathan. His words were hesitant, heavy with apology. He'd found one of his father's old letters while cleaning the attic, proof that the house had been meant for me. His father's final gift to ensure my comfort. He said he hadn't known. He said he was sorry. I read it twice. Not with pain, but with an ache that had softened into understanding. I didn't reply with words. Instead, I sent an old photo of our family on a summer day. All of us smiling beneath an easy sky. Then I turned off the phone and sat quietly. The evening light folding around me. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, it meant freedom. And in that silence, I finally felt both. Looking back now, I've learned that love without boundaries isn't kindness, it's surrender. When you give all of yourself without protecting any part, you stop existing as a person and start fading into the background of someone else's life. I used to think peace came from keeping everyone happy. But real peace, I've discovered, begins the moment you stop apologizing for needing space to breathe. I don't hate my son. I don't hate anyone. What happened taught me that forgiveness isn't about fixing what's broken, it's about freeing yourself from the weight of it. Protecting your heart doesn't make you cold, it means you've finally learned its worth. If my story made you think of someone, or of a time you stayed silent when you shouldn't have, I'd love to know. Tell me, what would you have done? Leave a comment. Share this story. And let's remind each other that quiet strength is still strength.